My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 33 years old now. And for most of my life, my family had one quiet agreement. No one ever said out loud. My younger sister Jenny was the future. I was the one who would be fine. That phrase sounds harmless until you grow up inside it. Until you realize it means nobody checks if you are actually fine. Nobody asks if you are tired, scared, drowning, or breaking. They just assume you will survive, because surviving has always been your assigned role. Jenny was 30, 3 years younger than me. And growing up, our family was solidly middle class. We were not rich, but we were comfortable enough that my parents started college funds for both of us when we were little. The plan was simple. They would contribute what they could. And by the time we each turned 18, we would have around $40,000 to help with college. Not life-changing money. Maybe. But enough to matter. Enough to soften the landing. From the time I understood what money was, my parents drilled one message into me. That fund was for my future. I needed to be responsible. I needed to make smart choices. I could not buy a video game without getting a speech about discipline and long-term planning. Meanwhile, Jenny got almost anything she wanted. Violin lessons, debut camp, new clothes before competitions, a laptop because her teacher said she was advanced. My parents called it investing in her gifts. When I asked for something, it was always, "Do you really need that?" Claire, let me paint the picture clearly. I was the steady kid. I played softball, got decent grades, had a small group of friends, and stayed out of trouble. I was not setting the world on fire, but I was not causing problems either. I was just a girl trying to grow up without making waves. My parents reacted to my life with polite boredom. Puis on a test. That's nice. Honey. Made the team. Good job. It felt like being acknowledged by people who had already decided I was not the interesting child. Jenny, though, was special. Advanced classes, honors programs, violin, debate club, enrichment activities, glowing teacher comments. And she was smart. I will never pretend she wasn't. But the way my parents talked about her, you would think she was destined to cure cancer, reform Congress, and solve poverty before her 25th birthday. Every dinner somehow became about Jenny. Jenny got first chair. Jenny's debate team won regionals. Jenny's teacher says she has extraordinary potential. There it was. Potential. That word followed her like a crown. For my 16th birthday, I got a $50 gift card and a card signed by my dad. For Jenny's 16th. They threw a surprise party. Invited 40 people. Rented a restaurant. And bought her a MacBook Pro. When I asked why mine had been so different, my mom looked almost annoyed. Jenny's going places. Claire, we need to support her ambitions. I smiled because that was what I had trained myself to do. But inside, something small and tender folded in on itself. Because what does that tell a daughter? That your sister is the investment and you are the backup plan. Senior year of high school. I applied to state schools. Nothing flashy. Just solid public universities where I could study finance, graduate, and build a stable life. I got into my first choice. A good state university, about 2 hours from home. I was thrilled. My parents said, "Oh, that's good." Then they went back to discussing Jenny's national merit application. Jenny was a junior then, but prestigious schools were already circling. Ivy League interest, scholarship letters, special invitations. My parents practically floated through the house. Our daughter might go to Columbia. Yale sent her a personal letter. Princeton is interested. They said our daughter in a way that made me feel invisible, even though I was sitting right there. I started college in the fall of 2009, when the economy still felt bruised from the crash. A week before I left, my parents sat me down at the kitchen table. I remember the light that afternoon. Pâle. Flat. Almost gray. My dad cleared his throat in the way he did before delivering bad news. Claire, we need to talk about your college fund. I thought maybe the account had taken a hit in the market. That would have hurt. But I would have understood. What I was not prepared for was my mother looking down at her folded hands and saying, "We've made a decision." My stomach tightened. "We're reallocating your college fund to Jenny's education." For a second, the whole room went silent in my head. "I'm sorry," I said. "What?" My dad leaned forward, using his calm, reasonable voice, the one that made unfair things sound practical. "Jenny has been accepted to Columbia University. It's an incredible opportunity. But even with scholarships, the costs are substantial. Your state school is much more affordable. We think you'll be fine with loans and part-time work." I stared at him. "You're giving her my college fund." My mother flinched, but only slightly. "The fund you told me my whole life was for my education. We're not giving it away," she said quickly. "We're investing it where it will have the most impact. And I don't matter." My dad sighed, like I was making this difficult. "That's not what we said. You're practical. Claire, you don't need an Ivy League education to succeed. Jenny is different. She has real potential." There it was again. Potential. Not love. Not fairness. Not promise. Potential. I asked if they were leaving me anything. Anything at all? My dad said they would keep $5,000 in my account for emergencies, but the rest, about $35,000, was going to Jenny. He said it as though he were being generous, like leaving me scraps from something they had promised me was an act of kindness. I left for college a week later with one suitcase. $5,000 that vanished within one semester. And a lesson I never forgot. My family had chosen who was worth investing in, and it was not me. That $5,000 emergency fund lasted exactly one semester. Tuition, books, housing, meal plans, endless fees I had never even heard of. It disappeared faster than I thought possible. By January, I was applying for every student loan I qualified for and searching for a job. I ended up working at a grocery store 25 hours a week while carrying a full course load. My schedule became brutal. Classes from 8 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon. Work from 4 until 9. Then homework and studying until midnight. Sleep for a few hours. Repeat. Weekends were for extra shifts and unfinished assignments. I was 19 years old and already exhausted. Meanwhile, Jenny was living her dream at Columbia. My parents posted constant updates online. Jenny made the dean's list. Jenny is doing research with a famous professor. Jenny is spending spring break in London at an academic conference. Every post felt like someone twisting a knife. Whenever I called home, the conversations were always the same. My parents would ask, "How's school?" I would barely answer before they spent the next 30 minutes talking about Jenny. One night, I mentioned that I was working 25 hours a week. My father chuckled. "Good. Builds character." I almost laughed. Apparently, suffering was character building when it happened to me. But when Jenny got an unpaid internship, and my parents had to help fund it, it was celebrated like she'd won a Nobel Prize. The double standard was so obvious it was almost impressive. Sophomore year was my breaking point. I was drowning in debt and exhaustion. My grades had slipped below where I wanted them to be because I simply didn't have enough hours in the day. I finally called home and asked for help. Not thousands, not even hundreds. I asked if they could send me a couple $100s each month so I could cut back my work hours and focus more on school. There was a long silence. Then my mother laughed. Actually laughed. "Honey, we can't do that. We're already stretched thin helping Jenny." I closed my eyes. "I know," I said quietly. "That's why you gave her my college fund." Silence. Then she sighed. "We did what was best for the family." Best for the family. I hated those words. "Jenny's going to make us all proud one day," she continued. "You need to stop being bitter." I hung up. Then I didn't call home again for 6 months. Nobody noticed. Not one person called to ask if I was okay. Not one person wondered if something had happened. That silence told me everything I needed to know. By senior year, I was surviving on caffeine, stubbornness, and pure spite. I was taking 18 credits and working nearly 30 hours every week. I had interviews lined up while trying to keep my GPA high enough to graduate with honors. One particular week still lives in my nightmares. A double shift on Saturday, a major exam on Monday, a group project due Wednesday, 2 job interviews on Thursday and Friday. I slept maybe 15 hours total. I remember standing in the grocery store aisle one night, stocking soup cans, and suddenly realizing I couldn't remember the date. I was so tired. My hands were shaking. Nobody knew. Nobody cared. I just kept going. Then came finals week. I got hit with the worst stomach virus of my life. I could barely stand without feeling dizzy. But I had 3 finals and several shifts at work. Missing work wasn't an option. I needed every dollar. So I took my exams while fighting nausea and worked my shifts with medication in my pocket. I called my mother that night. A stupid part of me still wanted my mom. I thought maybe she'd say, "Do you need anything?" Maybe she'd offer sympathy. Maybe she'd tell me to come home. Instead, she said, "Drink water and get some rest." Then she spent 20 minutes telling me about the graduation celebration they were planning for Jenny. 100 guests, a rented venue, professional catering, $8,000. I was sitting on the floor of my apartment wrapped in a blanket because I was too weak to stand. I didn't even have enough money to order soup. And my mother was talking about floral centerpieces. I was too tired to be angry. I was simply empty. I graduated 4 years later with a finance degree and nearly $80,000 in student loans. My graduation ceremony was on a Saturday morning. I walked across that stage, accepted my diploma, smiled for pictures. Then I sat with my roommate's family, because mine wasn't there. Why? Because they were in New York, celebrating Jenny's graduation. Her graduation had happened a week earlier, but they had planned a long weekend of parties and events around it. Apparently my ceremony conflicted with brunch, months before. When I told my parents the date, my mother had sighed. "Oh, honey, that's the same weekend as Jenny's celebration. We can't possibly miss that. But we're very proud of you." They sent a card. Inside was a $100 check. The message read, "Congratulations on your achievement. Love, Mom and Dad." The card had a stock photo of a graduate on the front. I remember staring at it in my dorm room. I laughed. Then I cried. Not because they missed my graduation, but because some foolish part of me had still hoped they wouldn't. Jenny graduated with honors, and already had a prestigious nonprofit job waiting for her in Manhattan. My parents posted dozens of pictures online. Fancy restaurants, Broadway shows, family photos. I wasn't in any of them. I was 800 miles away, packing boxes by myself. My mother's profile picture became a photo of her and Jenny at graduation. It stayed that way for 2 years. I wasn't mentioned online except for one post that said, "So proud of both our daughters." There were 15 pictures attached, 14 of Jenny. One of my high school graduation from 4 years earlier. I moved to Chicago for my first job at a mid-sized accounting firm. The salary sounded amazing until I did the math. Taxes, rent, food, transportation, and my enormous student loans. I rented a tiny studio apartment in a questionable neighborhood because it was all I could afford. I furnished it with used furniture and one decent mattress because my back hurt from sleeping on a futon. I ate ramen more nights than I want to admit. I bought rice and beans in bulk. I clipped coupons. Every spare dollar went toward my debt. Every month, I sent in those payments and thought about how different my life would have been if my parents had simply divided the college fund fairly. But they didn't. They invested in potential, so I invested in myself. And little by little, without anyone's help, I started building a future no one expected me to have. The first few years in Chicago were not glamorous. I worked 60-hour weeks during tax season and volunteered for every awful project nobody else wanted. If a client needed someone to stay late, I stayed. If there was extra work on the weekend, I took it. I had learned something important in college. Nobody was coming to save me, so I stopped waiting. By 28, I had paid off all $80,000 of my student loans. Every penny. I remember making that final payment. I sat in my tiny apartment, staring at the screen, waiting for some huge emotional moment. Instead, I just felt light. For the first time in nearly a decade. I didn't owe anybody anything. I called my parents. I don't know why. Maybe some small, stubborn part of me still wanted them to say they were proud. My father answered, "I paid off my loans." I said. There was a pause. "See," he replied. "We told you you'd be fine." That was it. No congratulations. No acknowledgement of what it had taken. Just proof. In his mind. That they had been right all along. I hung up and went to work the next morning. Years passed. I switched firms at 29 and moved to a larger company with better opportunities. The work became even more demanding. But the pay improved. I finally moved into a real one-bedroom apartment. I started putting money into savings. I bought decent furniture. I took my first vacation. Small things that felt enormous after years of merely surviving. At 31, I became a senior accountant. At 32, I made manager. Then, 2 months ago, at 33 years old, I became a partner. A partner, one of the youngest in the firm's history. I had an office with my name on the door. Profit sharing. A huge raise. A future I once couldn't even imagine. I should have celebrated immediately. Instead, I called my parents. Because apparently, some childhood hopes never completely die. My mother answered, "Hi. Mom, I have some great news." "Oh, that's nice. Dear, can this wait? We're heading out. It'll only take a second." I smiled despite myself. I made partner. Silence. Then, "Oh, that's nice. Good for you." I blinked. That was it. "That's nice. Good for you." Like I told her I had bought a new coffee maker. "Mom? Did you hear me? I made partner at 33. "Yes. I heard you. We're very happy for you. Listen. Jenny's going through something right now and needs us to be available." Of course she did. Jenny always needed something. I hung up without saying goodbye. I didn't cry. I had stopped crying over my family years ago, but it still hurt. A week later, I got a text. "Can I call you? I need to talk about something important." It was from Jenny. I almost ignored it. We had never been close. There had always been an invisible wall between us. She knew our parents favored her. I knew it. Everybody knew it. She simply accepted it as the natural order of things. But curiosity got the better of me. I texted back, "Sure." She called within 2 minutes. No greeting. No congratulations. No small talk. "I'm in a really bad financial situation," she said. I frowned. "I need to ask you for money." I actually laughed. I couldn't help it. The irony was too perfect. "You need money from me. I know it's awkward," she said quietly, "but I don't know who else to ask." "What happened to your amazing career?" A long sigh. "I left that job 3 years ago." "What?" "It wasn't paying enough." I sat down. "Okay. I went back to school and got my master's." I blinked. "Wait. You went to graduate school?" "Yes. I thought Mom and Dad paid for Columbia with my college fund." "They did. And now you have graduate school debt too." Silence. "Jenny, how bad is this?" Another sigh. "I've had a few jobs since then. Things didn't really work out." A few jobs. That phrase said more than she realized. "What do you need?" I finally asked. "I was hoping you could loan me some money." "How much?" Silence. Then, 30,000. I nearly dropped my phone. $30,000. Almost the exact amount of my college fund that had been given to her. "You're kidding." "I'm not." I leaned back in my chair. "Jenny, you took my college fund? Mom and Dad invested in you because you had potential? Remember, I was the practical one." "That wasn't my decision," she said quickly. "But you accepted it." "I was 17. And then for the next 15 years? You never once said it was wrong." She didn't answer. I took a slow breath. "You never apologized." Another silence. Then, quietly, "I deserved it." The words hit me harder than I expected. I was a good student, she continued. I worked hard. So did I. My voice came out sharper than intended. I worked 25 hours a week in college. Silence. I graduated with $80,000 in debt because you deserved my college fund. She sounded defensive now. This isn't about the past. No, I laughed softly. Then, what is it about? I'm your sister. I'm asking for help. Where was my help? You were fine. I froze. Those 3 words. You were fine. The family motto. The excuse for every unfair thing they had ever done. I closed my eyes. I wasn't fine. Jenne. She said nothing. I was drowning. Silence. I just learned how to drown quietly. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, I thought you'd understand. I do understand. I looked out the window at the Chicago skyline. I understand exactly what this feels like. I'm in trouble. So was I. I need support. So did I. I took a breath. And nobody came. She started crying. I can't believe you're being so cruel. Cruel. That word almost made me laugh. I remembered ramen dinners. Second jobs. Sleeping 4 hours a night. Graduating alone. I remembered calling home, while sick, and listening to my mother talk about Jenny's $8,000 graduation party. Cruel. No. Cruel had already happened. I'm not loaning you $30,000. I said calmly. So you're just going to let me suffer? I stared out the window. No. I paused. I'm going to let you figure it out. Claire. I did. Silence. Then I added softly. Character building. I remember, that's what Dad used to call it. She hung up. 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. Mom. I knew exactly why. I answered anyway. How could you say no to your sister? She demanded. And just like that, after years of silence, our family war finally began. How could you say no to your sister? My mother demanded before I could even say hello. I leaned back in my office chair. She needs help. She needs $30,000. I corrected. That's not help. That's a bailout. She's family. I laughed softly. The words sounded almost absurd. Where was this family energy when I needed help? I asked. When I was working myself to exhaustion, when I asked for a couple $100s a month and you laughed at me, that was different. No, I said quietly. It wasn't. Claire. You were fine. There it was again. Those 3 words. I almost admired their consistency. I was never fine. Mom. I was surviving. She sighed impatiently. You're still bitter about the college fund after all these years. I stared at the city outside my office window. I'm not bitter about the money. Then what? I'm bitter because you chose her. Silence. You decided she was worth investing in, and I wasn't. That's not true. You gave her my future, and told me to work harder. We did what we thought was best. And now you're asking me to clean up the mess. She's your sister, and I'm your daughter. Silence. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, she said softly, You've become very hard. I almost smiled. No. Mom? I became realistic. She started crying. If you don't help her, I don't know what we're going to do. I heard it immediately. The guilt, the manipulation, the same old song. You'll figure it out. Claire, you always do. I hung up. An hour later, my father called. The conversation was almost identical. I was selfish, vindictive, punishing Jenny for decisions she didn't make. I let him finish. Then I asked one question. What exactly am I supposed to be grateful for? Silence. You had a roof over your head. I also had a college fund that disappeared. You turned out fine. There it is again. I closed my eyes. Being fine became everyone's excuse to ignore me. He didn't answer. Finally, he said, Family helps family. I laughed. No. You help Jenny. He hung up. That night, I received a long text from my sister. It was filled with apologies and explanations. She was sorry. She didn't understand how difficult things had been for me. She knew I was hurt. She promised she'd pay me back. She said this was a one-time request. I read it twice. Then, I deleted it. The next morning, my mother called again. This time she was sweet, almost suspiciously sweet. She asked how work was going, congratulated me on making partner, said she was proud of me. I nearly laughed. Then she finally said it. I know we didn't handle the college fund fairly. I waited. We made a mistake. A long pause, but that's in the past. There it was. The real reason for the call. And your sister needs help right now. I rubbed my forehead. Mom? Do you hear yourself? What? You're asking me to reward her failure because I succeeded. That's not what I'm doing. It is exactly what you're doing. She grew frustrated. What about 20,000? No. 15. No. 10. No. Silence. Then her voice turned cold. So you're just going to watch your sister suffer? I answered calmly. I'm going to watch her figure it out. She hung up. The calls continued for days. My aunt called. A cousin texted. Apparently, everyone had opinions about my money. Nobody had opinions when I was 20 years old and working until midnight. Finally, I sent one group text. I'm not changing my mind. Stop asking. If this continues, I'll block everyone. My father replied almost immediately. We're trying to help our daughter. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed, you have 2 daughters. You chose to help one. The other helped herself. Nobody responded. A few hours later, Jenny sent me a separate message. I'm sorry you feel like we didn't care about you. I looked at those words. Feel like, as if it were a misunderstanding, as if I had imagined everything. I replied one final time. You had my college fund. You had our parents' support. You had every advantage I never got. You had potential. I remember, I was just the practical one. And somehow, I'm the successful one, while you're asking me for money. Think about what that says. She never answered. 3 weeks passed. Then, I got another text. I got a second job working retail on weekends. It sucks. But I need the money. I guess you were right about character building. I stared at the message. For the first time in years, I almost smiled. Not because she was struggling, but because she was finally doing what I'd been forced to do at 18, taking responsibility. I didn't respond. A week later, my parents called again. This time, they weren't asking for money. They were informing me they had co-signed a consolidation loan. They were letting Jenny move back home. They were helping her get back on her feet. I simply said, okay, good luck. My mother sounded offended. That's all you have to say. What else is there to say? We helped you too. I laughed. You raised me. We gave you a home. You also gave away my college fund. Silence. Then quietly, she said, you're never going to let that go. Are you? I looked around my office. My name on the door, the framed certificates, the career I'd built by myself. No. I admitted. Probably not. Why? I swallowed. Because for the first time in my life, I knew exactly why. Because it wasn't about the money. Silence. It was about what it represented. I took a deep breath. You looked at both of your daughters and decided one was worth betting on. No answer. And you didn't choose me. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then my mother whispered, I'm sorry you feel that way. I closed my eyes. I'm sorry you did that to me. Then I hung up. I don't know if I'll ever have a real relationship with my family. Maybe someday. Maybe not. A month later, I learned the full truth. After Columbia, Jenny had taken a nonprofit job in Manhattan, making decent money, but she wanted the television version of New York, the expensive apartment, the restaurants, the designer clothes, the networking events. Within a year, she had accumulated $15,000 in credit card debt. My parents paid it off. Then she went back for her master's degree and took out massive loans. Then came another apartment. More debt. More shopping. More excuses. Every time she fell, my parents softened the landing until they couldn't anymore. Now she had $60,000 in credit card debt, $85,000 in student loans, no full-time job, and a weekend retail position. This was the potential they invested in. This was the daughter they chose. Last night I celebrated making partner with some colleagues. We went to a beautiful steakhouse. I ordered the expensive wine. I ordered dessert. I enjoyed every single bite. Because I earned it. Every bit of it. No handouts. No special treatment. No one believing in my potential. I simply did the work. My family made their choice when I was 18. They chose potential. I chose results. And results paid for the steak. The office. And the name on the door? This morning, I received one final text from Jenny. For what it's worth, I really am proud of you. I always knew you'd succeed. I read the message twice. Then I archived it. Because being the reliable daughter isn't a compliment when people only remember you when they need something. I was fine. But only because I learned how to save myself. And if that makes me the villain in my family story, I can live with that. Because in mine, I'm the 33-year-old partner who built everything from nothing, and for the first time in my life, that's enough.